The contents of the following conversation are not endorsed in any way by the United States Army, its reserve and guard components, or any entity of the United States Armed Forces. Opinions, guidance, and anything mentioned within the conversation are strictly the viewpoints of the individuals involved. Hello, everyone, and thanks for checking out this episode of the Lost LT podcast, episode 2. Here returning is James.
Oh, Lieutenant James Nelson.
Yeah, I'm laughing because I listened to the first episode, and I think I even said I'll try to call you James from now on. And I don't think I called you James not once, so just had to start with that. But I mean, this one, so last episode, we were just mostly trying to figure out who you were, try to get to know you, try to get to know your background story. So we'll kind of gloss over that for the most part. If you are interested, obviously check out the first episode and you can learn all you need to about Lieutenant Nelson here. I did want to do some housekeeping though, speaking of last episode, and there's a story that you told about the trainee or private that was going to kill himself to get out of basic training. Do you remember that? Do you want to kind of like reframe that real quick? Because I can't do it without laughing. And this is terrible, but...
Yeah, he was freaked out about the whole situation. He thought he made a mistake. This is before we actually even started things, really. And his way out was saying, going to the drill sergeant without me knowing. Of course, I'm with him, but he doesn't tell me what's happening. And basically said, I'm going to kill myself. And the drill sergeant basically said, "You going to do it tonight?" Said no. I said, "Okay, go back to the barracks."
Yeah, and so the reason why I was laughing is just because this kid dropped like this huge bombshell on you. He was like, you're trying to be a battle buddy, you're trying to help him out, and you asked him, "Hey, is there anything I should know before we talk to the drill sergeant?" Because you're probably thinking, "Crap, this guy's got contraband, or he's maybe thinking suicidal, violent thoughts," right? So just trying to give you like a way to prime it, and then he just drops it on you. But to the defense of that drill sergeant, and I thought about this for a while after I listened to it. I was like, I think they understand when someone's actually going to be a threat to themselves, and I think they understand the difference between that and someone who's just willing to say anything to get out of basic training, because this was the first night.
Yeah, one of the very first nights.
Yeah, so like I really just want to reiterate that the Army takes suicide very, very seriously. I mean, there are plenty resources that for those soldiers that are actually in that state of mind that to help them get out of there, because it's just not it's hard to say it's not a laughing matter when we're laughing at this particular story, but when you look at the whole thing, there's no way this kid was actually going to do it. So it's just one of those like, yeah, whatever, kid. It's like the guys that say, "Oh, I would be a perfect soldier, but the second a drill sergeant got into my face, I'd knock him out." You just kind of like tongue-in-cheek roll your eyes, laugh it off. So just kind of want to get that out of the way, because like we're not laughing at the actual act of suicide. It's just the extent some kids will go to quit. And I'll just kind of leave it at that. So I think I got my point across. I don't know if you...
Yeah, in all seriousness, I've known 3 people, not necessarily super well, but 3 people since I've been in that have taken their own lives. So it's not anything to joke about. In this particular case, it was almost laughable because I said, "Hey, anything I should know?" And then he drops that bomb. So it was like, well, you kind of screwed me on that one. Thanks. Thanks for the heads up.
Yeah, this is really awkward now, and you're just going to inflict the wrath of the really angry drill sergeant. So, yeah, I think that's, again, not a laughing matter when it's for real, when it's serious. And the other one was just kind of reiterating like the point of this podcast. So we definitely want to do our best to like portray as accurate of a representation of what it's like to be a lieutenant in the National Guard. So with that being said, I mean, we do have a lot of people that are in the reserve and active duty sides as well. So eventually, it's no offense, but we're going to move on to other guests, not just you and me the whole time, just to give that kind of like that variety of information that's out there. So on the whole, doing our best, like we're also just kind of chatting like 2 bros, for lack of better words. So, I mean, if there's some stuff that's not PC, then tough shit, So try to keep it entertaining, try to keep it informative, try to find a good balance between the two. And with that being said, and this is weird because it's not going to happen, but I'll try to be less uptight. But I mean, you know me for...
We'll see.
Yeah, exactly. I'll just get even more uptight. So on that note, your feedback is always welcome. Comments, questions, suggestions, all that stuff. Like we're definitely open to covering or talking about the stuff that some people might want to. And then one last point was we said we get the shit kicked out of us a lot, and that is like, okay, drill sergeants are not physically beating us, right? At least in my experience. In yours?
Correct. No.
Okay, yeah. So
not that old. Jeez.
We're getting smoked, in other words. And for those of you that are listening that may not understand what smoking means, you want to take a stab at what that means?
It's corrective physical fitness to make a point, basically. So that could be literally anywhere from doing 10, 20 push-ups to you and 3 of your buddies having your heads together in a pool of sweat because you've been pushing for so long, which is something that actually happens. So there's a wide variety of what it could be. Right.
So again, this isn't like the Vietnam era days where drill sergeants are able to put their hands on you. So at least that we know of, and in our experience. So anyway, so going into talking about, since we last had you on here and last recorded the first episode, I want to say a few things have changed. Maybe not so much for me. I just continue to be the operations officer, or XO, for my company. But you got a big change coming up. Are we able to talk about that a little bit? And
yeah, for sure. I found out actually while I was at NTC, I had an interview in a van because it was the only quiet place I could find, and had a panel interview, which is kind of interesting just because that's not typically how it runs.
Inside the van, or was this like, did you call in?
No, I just called in from inside a van.
Okay.
Yeah, so this was from a state away. But I had an interview for command. It went really well. I actually interviewed against one of my colleagues, one of my friends. So that was kind of bittersweet, but I did get a phone call after saying, hey, congratulations for getting it. You deserve it. So that was really cool. That won't happen for a couple more months, only because there's some administrative things that need to happen first. But that was a pretty big, I would say it's an honor. I've been there. It's kind of a unique situation because I went from a platoon leader, which is starting out as a brand new butter bar. We don't really have an XO role within our company, but I kind of took on that role and basically like the assistant manager, basically.
Right.
And then actually going into command. So it's not common to spend all of basically the first few years of your career in the same location, but just being a signal officer and only having 2 signal companies in the state and being kind of a small specialized team, it was actually a really cool thing to have because during NTC, so basically a month-long fun fest, if you will, I had probably 8 or 10 of my guys saying, hey, I really hope you get it, because I didn't find out until after if it had gone through or not. So that was really neat, having everyone from private saying, hey, I really hope you get it, and be really cool if you got it, to my senior enlisted being like, hey, I really hope you get it, and really push for my first sergeant saying, hey, we can do some really cool things before I'm done with my time and step out. So that was pretty cool. I don't really have a whole lot of feelings, but I kind of got the feels a couple times during those conversations. So
caught some feels.
Neat. Yep.
So did you, when we're commissioning and we be told about like KD time and like how, I don't know if you remember the lecture that we got, but it's like you can either go staff, and if you go there, it's like a career killer, or you can go platoon leader, which is what most people want. Like from the onset, they want to be a platoon leader. And little did I know that's actually like, I took that for granted. I just assumed you'd be a platoon leader regardless of when you commission and what your drive is. But evidently it's not the case. So like some lieutenants, at least in the Guard, from what I've seen, end up being called excess LTs. Like they're waiting for a slot to open up before they can actually take over. So they're kind of just doing administrative stuff, or they're kind of just like helping be productive, of course, but they're not getting credit for it, for lack of a better word. So a lot of people want that PL role. So when you're sitting there as PL, did you see yourself going as all the way up to commander? Like, was that part of your path, your dream?
Yeah, that was part of my plan. It's what I wanted to do. Especially, I had a business before joining, and I really enjoyed that management and kind of mentor side. And then once I got there and started working with the guys, I came in not knowing much of anything about signal. So I'm definitely not like a tech guy. I'm not like your typical signaleer that builds servers on the side or whatever for fun. It's not really my style. But once I got into it and got into more of the management side, that's where I really enjoyed being. So mentoring, whether it's on the enlisted side or other lieutenants, I really enjoyed that. And then I started doing a lot of the paperwork side of the house, which is not nearly as fun, but it is very important because if it's not on paper, it doesn't count, type thing.
Right.
And I've learned some lessons along the way on that side as well. Not screwing stuff up necessarily, but not doing some of the steps that were kind of never told to me. So learning the hard way, okay, hey, if that's not done, then this doesn't get done, type of thing. But yeah, command was my ultimate goal. And I'm doing it early on enough. I'll actually be a first lieutenant still when I take over for probably about the first 9 months. 9 months to a year, I'll be a lieutenant still. So it's early enough to where I could take a second command potentially, or I could go into the staff lane. A lot of people don't like having multiple commands. I don't know, maybe I won't want to after the first time around. But it's kind of in my, long distance view is having that second one. But like I said, that could change very easily. It might not make any sense at that point. I might choose to rebranch or go a different direction altogether. So
plus you're just knocking it out soon, like sooner than most. So I think with our class, the 14, 15 of us that graduated together in 2016, I think you're the first one to assume command. Would that be fair to say?
I believe so, yeah.
So that's a pretty awesome feat. And I'm kind of kicking myself because I was encouraged by a certain sergeant major to go for it. And, being the whatever I am, I was like, no, I'm just not ready for that kind of commitment yet, because it is going to be, that's pretty much going to consume your life, even though it's a part-time thing. If you're going to be a good commander, you're going to put the time and the energy and the effort in. And I'm just not there yet. This past AT kind of changed me a little bit. I would absolutely take command for my current company that I'm with, and without a doubt, put all the minutes and hours and days into it. But I never really saw command as like my trajectory. If it happened, great. If it doesn't, I'll be okay with that. I don't know if that's because I've got 11 years of experience already under my belt, but to each their own. If I was to assume command of something, I would definitely make that my priority. But for right now, it's just kind of like, I kind of want to go on the staff side of things, especially with Signal being so technical. I want to understand that a little bit more, because my year as XO, I didn't really get to, you don't touch the equipment already as it is as a platoon leader. As an XO, forget about it. Like you're more worried about the logistics and the maintenance and making sure everything's actually running smoothly. So to be able to spend some time to catch up on how a node operates and the various paths and all the phases it goes through, like it just wasn't happening for me at all. So I would like to see some more staff time before I even think I'm worthy of command. But yeah, congratulations on that. That's like a long-winded way of saying good job.
Thanks.
I did want to apply just to give you a hard time, but by the time I was actually like pushed to do it, you had already shown me your message. It's like, oh well, shoot, you got me there. So
I did, just to kind of feed on that. A lot of my guys, I learned a lot from them, and I said I went in not knowing anything. That was kind of the joke first, like, oh, he's brand new LT, doesn't know anything about Signal. Like, let me explain it to you, sir. And I was like, okay, that's fine. Keep explaining. And then I turned it into like a game. Okay, what are you doing? Oh yeah, we're just setting this up. I'm like, no, detail it out to me like you're training someone. And which helped me learn a lot more practical side, because in school we barely talked about the systems that we...
Yeah, Bullock didn't really seem to help much either.
Yeah, so all of our equipment, all our bread and butter, we touched on in theory, but we never actually touched the equipment, and we didn't focus on those specific pieces of equipment. So even stuff like loading radios, I had done it in school, but I didn't really know how to do it. So even just this last AT, this NTC rotation, I got to the point where like, hey, we need someone to load. I'm like, give me the SKL. I got it. I'll load you up real quick. No big deal. And then, yep, you need to change channel on it. Yep, cool. Good to go. So just from working with my guys and having them explain stuff to me, especially being Signal, we have a lot of guys that are very quiet, guys and gals that are very quiet. So you have to pull information out of them. So I turned it into a game with a couple of people that I noticed were really smart but didn't talk. So I was like, hey, every day at 1500, you got to tell me something. And he caught on to it after a while. But he dodged me, and I just catch him a different part of the day. I'm like, hey, explain something to me. Just pick whatever you want. Teach me about it. And that got him to step out of his shell a little bit, which is cool. And right. I learned stuff from him as well. Some of the stuff I already knew. Some of the stuff I had no idea about. And I still, to this day, learn things that I didn't know. I'm like, we can do that. That's awesome. Why has no one ever mentioned this to me before? Right. So that's pretty cool.
As long as you don't hear stuff like flux capacitor, I think you're good, right? Like, you son of a bitch, I know what you're saying. You're trying to BS me.
Well, I always say that it's kind of a joke. Like, I'm the least techie Signal officer you'll ever meet, which is not true. I've met other people that are less, but I have one colleague in particular. She's like, yeah, that's not the case. I've heard you explain stuff before, and it sounds like you know what you're talking about. I'm like, that just means I'm faking it well. She's like, I know you know what you're talking about. I'm like, okay, fine, a little bit. I picked up a little bit here and there.
Right. Yeah, it's a very, as we said, very technical thing. I think it's a diminishing skill, at least in my case. And I'm hoping that if I'm going to continue going where I think I am, staff was where I'll be able to play those games again, pick it up, study, and then just understand what it's like to actually have customers too. So definitely want to get into that with NTC. But before I do that, let me just make sure I've got everything here. Yeah, so you mentioned AT, NTC. Now, initially I wanted this podcast episode to be about my AT experience, because it was really rough for 2 weeks up in Camp Navajo. I don't know why you guys are complaining about NTC at all. Like your 30-day vacation. That's
basically a vacation. Yep.
Yeah, that's definitely not the case. So what is NTC? Let's just dive in.
NTC is National Training Center. It is supposed to be a simulated deployment. It lasts about 30 days. So there's a week leading up to it, 2 weeks of being in the boxes, they call it, and then a week of regen, basically unwinding everything you did. It's really cool because typically you don't get 30 days at a time or 28 days at a time of that type of environment. And then two, typically with an annual training, you don't get people trying to kill you from the other side, and you don't get to go through that experience where people actually do die, which is crazy to me that it's something that happens relatively consistently, that people do not come home from annual training. It blows my mind. But I see how it happens, and unfortunately while we're there we got to experience that. But it is very intense, very long hours. The whole point is to simulate a worse than normal deployment, essentially. So you're getting attacked often, at least, well, typically once a day, if not more, depending on how well you react to it. It gets more intense. So if you're doing dumb stuff and just not doing doctrinally correct responses to things, like, okay, well, we're going to turn it up a little bit just to teach you a lesson. Right. Or if you're reacting really well and the people in charge don't get the enjoyment out of it, your failure, then they'll be like, okay, fine, you're doing fine, we'll move on to the next thing. So but it is neat because, again, it's a long exercise, so you get that week before and week after to do all the preparation for it, and then you get 2 weeks of executing everything, and then a week to kind of, like I said, unwind all that, because you check out a bunch of vehicles, you have to turn them back in, and in typical Army fashion, they literally have to be better than when you checked them out, which seems counterintuitive, but it is what it is. So it's just a really neat experience. There's a lot that goes into it, both months ahead of time and then after the fact as well. So
yeah, and so I mean, it's 30 days, but I mean, you were thinking NTC like what, back in like January?
Yeah, we knew about it last year when we did our annual or our yearly training brief.
Right.
But so there was some preparation going in up to a year ago, but it really ramped up probably about 6 months ago, because we're organizing everything from shipping vehicles, shipping equipment to another state, getting supplies, because you legitimately need new first aid kits for everyone, or the contents of it, and you need to make sure that everyone has serviceable uniforms, and make sure that everyone has body armor, because we wear body armor for at least part of it. Make sure that everyone has the correct size helmet, because you're going to be wearing it for nearly a month straight, so it has to fit, all that kind of stuff. So and then like the feeding plans, and there's a lot of stuff you don't really even think about until you're there. Like, we need bags to take a crap in because there's no porta potties in some places, so we ended up buying a bunch of buckets to go with those bags, so we could have like somewhat, so it's stuff you don't really think about until either someone's already been there before you and can give you some nuggets, or whatever information they're willing to give you before you get there, which is, they're trying to be helpful, but at the same time they're relatively vague on purpose, so you have to go through the process of doing everything.
It's kind of like, in a sense, kind of like what the tax were. Like, you can kind of get some help from them, but you better make sure that all your T's are crossed, your I's are dotted before you ask for anything, and you better make sure that you didn't just, as you kind of said, like miss a huge step in the process. We can go into all kinds of details about how the tax really got on us for like the simplest of things, but I want to make the point of some of the stuff that you overlooked. So like, this is different because traditionally we're 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year, right? And AT is that time for us to actually be together for more than 48 hours. We can kind of, for lack of better words, understand like the nuances with your company, but then it's over and done with before it even really begins, because it just flies by. But 30 days of actually being in a deployed environment, I imagine that's a chance for you guys to really just dig up all the things that are both right and wrong with your unit. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. So you get to spending that much time doing continuous effort and working off the planning that was happening months ahead of time. It brings out everyone's true colors, good, bad, or indifferent. So you see some people are like, wow, that person's really high speed, I didn't expect that from them. Or, hey, this person can just get crapped on all day long and keep powering through it. Or you see someone that you think was really good, and you're like, they're actually really terrible at their job. Like, they did terrible planning, they did terrible execution, just nothing they did was right. I'm not saying that to be harsh, but we saw a few people like that, and we saw some people like, oh, that's pretty much what I expect from them. Like, cool. To go back to like the deployed environment portion of it, when I say you're getting attacked by people, so the OCTs, they're observers, coaches, and trainers is what the OCT stands for. It used to be back in the day that they were like...
Nick is fact checking right now.
Yeah. I had to think about it so I didn't get it wrong. Yep. But they used to be like TAC officers, where they were TAC NCOs, where they were trying to screw you up. They were trying to throw out tripping hazards, if you will, for you. Now they are observing, coaching, and training along the way. So they're pretty much a neutral party. But if you're going to do something stupid or dangerous, they're going to say, hey, no, that's a no-go. Don't even think about it. So I did see a couple situations that I was able to get out ahead of to prevent them from stepping in. But it took some headbutting with people that outranked me to be like, hey, this is not right. They're going to stop us. One, that's a side fact. But, first and foremost, this is wrong. We're not doing it this way. End of story. Which got me some dirty looks and into a little bit of hot water, but it was well worth it because I'm not letting my guys do anything that's not safe, regardless of what the environment is, notional or not. Yep. But and then the actual attacks are not happening from the OCTs. It's happening from opposing force to OPFOR. And they are literally, that could be everything from like a patrol of 8 people was our first attack that just snuck up on us during the middle of the day. Actually, it was in the morning. And attacked us, just opened fire. Then we had drones going overhead. We had, kind of notional NBC attacks. So we're donning full mop gear. It's 100 degrees outside and we're wearing basically like winter coats and pants and over boots and gloves and, with the hoods over our heads and masks on, the whole deal. So other stuff that goes into that is starting to look at, how safe is this? Like, it's part of the game. We have to do it. There's no way around that. But we need to also be prepared for it, because if it does happen in country, on deployment, that is what it is. Doesn't matter if it's 100 outside or 200 degrees outside. You still have to do the right thing.
You don't want that gas hitting you.
Yeah, if you don't want your face to melt off, Yep. So there's different stuff.
Man, there's a lot of things that just came up. So, first of all, drones attacked you?
So they actually had drones already there. They had helicopters as well, which was pretty cool. And they had drones that would fly over. And they didn't actually have drone attacks, but they would fly over just to test how we responded to it.
So like, hey, something's trying to survey us right now.
Exactly. And they actually were taking pictures of us with it that they used for like the after action reports and stuff like that. So they'd say, hey, your area, your LSA looks like a Walmart parking lot, was one of their pieces of feedback, because we had stuff lined up, staged correctly to, keep it organized. So
right.
That was one of their pieces of feedback. Like, you're too organized, make it look like crap. Basically, we're like, I don't like stuff being scattered. Like, this goes against everything I know.
Yeah, it's supposed to be orderly, isn't it? Like,
yeah, you'd think, but they did it that way because, like, hey, if they drop, one indirect fire, one IDF on you, then you have 10 trucks that are dead instantly.
Actually, you know what? You just reminded me of something that you mentioned that was going to bother you from the last episode. You confused mortar with claymore.
Correct.
Thanks
for pointing that out.
Yeah, I wanted to address that too in the earlier points, and redemption moment, so sorry.
Thanks.
But yeah, you're right. Like, I guess if you have everything nice and orderly and clustered together, one mortar and it's over.
Yeah, and they did actually use some of the different scanning technology to pick up frequencies that we had. So they can pick up FM, they can pick up cell phones if they want to. The one they used the most was not Blue Force trackers, but JCRs. They'd pick up the signal from those and then drop indirect fire. Keep in mind, there was I want to say 4,500 people out there total. So this is a massive movement. It's not just our little 33 person company was out there. We were attached to someone else and they were servicing someone else. So there's a ton of people out there, and they would do a ton of stuff that we didn't even see because we were actually one of the companies in the rear. They'd still attack us, still do NBC, and we didn't get to participate in the live fire, which we're actually kind of bummed about. But they did after we left the box, the day that we left the box, right after they came back, and they were shooting off live tank rounds, and helicopters were shooting up hillsides. Cool, man. It was really cool because we're done for all intents and purposes. We're off to the side, sorry. Starting to get our vehicles cleaned up and serviced and everything, and we were like, boom, boom, boom. Like, that's really cool. Wish we were there for that. But they do it. They're, in that sense, super sticklers for safety, because they basically work their way across the battlefield, get to the end of that area, pull a 180, and then start going back and firing. Not that quickly, but there's a reset time. Make sure that everyone, any downed vehicles or anything that are off the live fire range, make sure that every person is cleared off, so accountability becomes huge in this point. Make sure that everyone's gone, and then they actually have 2 different areas where they're firing. And I said, we're talking big rounds here. It's not just 5.56 rounds. We're talking actual tank rounds.
Right.
It was pretty cool.
Some noise. So just for anyone that's listening may not know what NBC is, that's nuclear, biological, chemical based attack. So basically you're in God, I can't stay away from acronyms. You're a MOP gear. So that's what you're explaining first, and that's mission oriented protective posture, right? That's what MOP stands for. And that's, I mean, think about, as you said, like the freaking like astronaut looking full on, like you're just not comfortable. So when there's hints of NBC capabilities in the area, you're supposed to operate with at least one level of this protective equipment. And it's clumsy. It does not, Nick's pulling it up right now. It just looks like, well, first of all, it looks like straight out of the 80s with the
it is,
the
it's
old
all outdated.
greens.
Which is funny. We had the desert camo, so the tan stuff, but it was equally as outdated.
So were you using like training MOP gear? Like,
yeah, it actually, across the back of it, it says for training purposes only.
Okay.
But it is the same. I don't know what's different about it. I'm guessing it's not coated with something. I couldn't tell you. I'm not an NBC guy, but
well, you don't want it out in the open. Like when you put it on, it's because you're going to get attacked. So.
Yeah. So we had to carry it with us at all times, including going to meetings and stuff like that. So it was really annoying actually having a big bundle. I rolled mine up into like the size of a sleeping bag, basically, of a rock hard sleeping bag essentially. But I just carried around with some 550 cord, but some people would carry a separate backpack just for it and whatever. But it's not convenient at all. And yeah, that's the desert stuff with the those are the new ones, the same ones we have. But we got new masks, so that was pretty cool. We got some updated stuff, and even just the carriers that you use to carry those around are a lot more comfortable than the old ones, which was great.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, like the gray pouches.
Yeah, so especially we wore them for 3 weeks, basically. So before we went into the box and the entire time we were in the box, and we carried our night vision and all that fun stuff. So you just have a lot of crap hanging off you, and that's uncomfortable to start with. Plus it's 100 degrees. You're soaked the whole time, basically. So it's something you have to adapt to pretty quick. Luckily, out of our 33-person company, which again is tiny for anyone listening, they're like, wait, 33 people in the company? That doesn't make any sense.
Sounds like a platoon, if anything.
Correct.
Yeah.
But we luckily didn't have any heat casualties, but there were other ones that actually got medevaced out. It does get pretty crazy pretty quick when you're donning all that stuff and it's 100+ degrees outside.
So about that, and the other, well, real quick, so JCRs, it's JBCP, right? Or what's
correct? It's just the older version of it.
Okay, so what that is, I don't know how much we can talk about it, but it's basically like it's like a monitor that just tells you where all friendlies are. You can mark where bad guys are. You can communicate with each other. It's just a really cool interconnected network. So I just wanted to go back and backtrack on that. So, but speaking of backtracking, going back to the deaths. So like this really took me by surprise because my company, we're up for NTC rotation in March of next year. Because like you said, you get like about a year's notice, like, hey, this is coming up. And we actually, I mean, this shouldn't be a surprise to most lieutenants out there, anybody that's listening that's in the military, but we get to look at our entire year's worth of training. And then we try to get as far out as possible. And right now it feels like NTC is a long time away, but just from watching you go through it, I'm sure it was just boom, it was here all of a sudden. And like we're doing like initial meetings with other companies trying to figure out like what our role is going to be. But when I don't know how to put this without sounding like a dirtbag, but like when I really noticed, or when I really started actually understanding like the gravity of it all, was when they said that there is a statistic of one person dies every rotation. And like, what is that? Is that what you heard, or like? Yeah.
So the initial briefing when we got there for all the S6, all the signaliers, the OICs and NCOICs went. I went as advance, so advanced party. So that first week I was going to every meeting under the sun, which was super fun, by the way. They brought us in and said, hey, you know what? With the exception of I think the last 2 rotations they do, I want to say it's 10 rotations a year, so it's not like completely year round, but close to it. They said there were 8 rotations in a row where one person died, and then they had like 1 or 2 that no one passed, and then unfortunately someone passed during our rotation. Someone we didn't know, it wasn't from our same state, but it was a guy that had been in for 30 years in and out of that same unit. He was a tanker, and there's not a whole lot of places to go from there, so he was perfectly happy being a tanker that entire time. His son was actually in the unit at one point.
Tanker meaning he drove a tank?
Correct, yeah. And the cool part, and this dude was 51 years old and with a couple guys in their early to mid 20s, so 4 people total. The really kind of cool part about the story is obviously it's terrible no matter how you look at it. But one of the other guys that was in there said the last thing he remembered before getting knocked out from flipping a tank over was that guy that passed, shoving him down to kind of protect him. So I was like, that's
Save
pretty
your
great.
life.
Yeah. So that was a little bit later into it, but it was still very sobering. Like something that, like, the moment we found out, it kind of heard rumor wise before it was officially released. But as soon as we heard it, I had been warning my guys for months ahead of time, like, people actually die here. Do not screw around. Do not do things you're not comfortable with. Don't do dumb stuff.
Yeah, don't take anything for granted either. Just don't assume anything.
Yeah, and don't let anyone tell you to do something if you know it's wrong. Because some people get excited about stuff, or, hey, just push through because they're under a bunch of stress. And I'm like, don't do it. If anyone, I'll take the rounds for you. If you say, screw you, I'm not doing it, tell me, I'll go to bat for you, because that's one thing I do not mess around with. But that was, like I said, for months ahead of time, I kept saying, they were probably getting sick of it, like, okay, whatever you say. But when we got there, our first sergeant is a safety guy for his state, and he showed me a map of all of the rollovers and fatalities on the overall map that had, and it was insane. The amount of black and red dots on there. I think black was a fatality, red was a rollover, and it was littered with them. And I was like, holy crap, like, this is something that actually happens consistently. Not every time, but often enough where it's like, should we be doing this? I don't know. It feels kind of crazy.
Well, so earlier you're talking about, like, there's Apaches, there's tanks, there's all kinds of moving pieces and parts, and, like, it's the default thing is like, oh, I don't want to say I'm not dumb enough, but I'm more aware of myself than to get run over by a Humvee. And so when I asked about, like, well, how are some of these fatalities happening? Well, it's like, you're doing what, 12, 14, 18 hour days? When you're actually in the box?
In the box, we did 18 to 20 hour days pretty typically, like back to back to back.
So you're trying to rack out any chance you get, I imagine, right? Racking out means you're trying to sleep. So if you're doing that and you're trying to find a nice shaded area, you're probably going to try to sleep under your Humvee. And if I understand correctly, we'll probably get into this a little bit more detail, but like jump missions. But if you guys get a Frago saying, hey, you guys are going to go to the site and do this thing, and I'm speaking very generally, obviously, it's you pick up and go, grab your crap, and just you head out. So you might actually run over somebody. Like there's a...
Yeah, so I thought it happened a lot quicker than it actually does, but you typically get around like 12 to 24 hours, so you know what's coming and you can start prepping, because we have enough equipment, being Signal and everyone else, because you're setting up big tents and stuff like that, and a lot of other equipment if you're actually providing services and whatnot. So you get a little bit of a heads up, but especially for the guys that are working the night shift, it is nearly impossible to sleep during the day there, because there's some shade, but it's still 100 plus degrees outside. So it is, the first or second night out there, one of the early on, I went like 36 hours straight without sleep. So by the time I did get to sleep, I was out, but I still only got a couple hours of sleep, because every half hour to an hour I'd wake up just completely drenched. And I don't sleep well like that. And even one of our guys like, oh, I love sleeping in the heat, I don't care if I sweat, whatever. He was like, I can't sleep here, it's too hot. So when you're getting really crappy sleep or a really short amount of sleep, you tend to just pass out in random places. And especially if you're someone that's not used to that, like I typically operate pretty well, not a whole lot of sleep, but at a certain point you're like, I'm exhausted. Like it legitimately took me the better part of all of last week to be to the point where I couldn't just fall asleep on the couch watching TV with my boys, or like be yawning at the dinner table, or yawning at work, or like head nodding on the way home from work, just because I was like, oh, I've gotten 8 hours of sleep a couple nights in a row, I should be good, but like I wonder if I'm sick, I wonder if I have cancer or something, because I keep wanting to fall asleep randomly. And then eventually I got out of it. This on Sunday was the last day that I kind of like, all right, I'm finally rested now after 6 days of being home. But yeah, that's, I think someone did get run over a couple rotations ago. They were sleeping under one of the bigger trucks, like, oh, I'm just gonna lean against this tire, no big deal. Even starting up a big diesel engine still didn't wake him up, and squashed him on the way out. So, or
you're just like maybe not properly chalked, or who knows, like there's just so just talking about like the exhaustion, the fatigue, there's just so many opportunities for just gross oversights that can result in somebody getting severely injured or killed, and it's really tragic. And I think Nick pulled up the it was a Nevada National Guardsman got killed and rolled over, and I mean the silver lining is that he saved a life. I mean, that's, if you want to talk about like the epitome of a hero, that's I mean, he looked out for this other guy's safety before his own. And it just sucks. Like it's one thing, I was explaining this to Nick earlier, it's one thing to to be killed in action, I'm not saying I'm brave by any means, but the expectation is if I did die, it's because I died in a firefight or in war, right, in combat. Saying this as a signal officer, of course, so like the likelihood, but that's the expectation, is we're supposed to die on the battlefield, not in training, of all things. And that's just, it just sucks. We'll put the link to this article in the description in case anybody wants to know about what happened, because I don't want to get into the details. It's just one of those very sobering things. And so one of the things I'm letting my guys know from now is, like, even though I may not be with them next year, because I'm, as I said earlier, I might be moving on to a staff role with somebody, a completely different company or battalion. It's real. Like, don't be that guy that doesn't come home. Like, I don't even know how to emphasize that enough already.
Yeah, my wife always jokes around that I don't have feelings. She's like, you never show emotion. You always make jokes at inappropriate times. I'm like, that's just my personality, sorry. But the first group of people we sent out, they went out advanced party once we were going into the box. And I was thinking about it. I walked in, they were all eating an MRE together, a delicious meal together. And I was like, this literally could be any one of or all of their legitimate last meals. Like, if this was real world or even in that training environment, which is really sobering. And I'm sitting there and kind of like thinking about that, and it's kind of getting me a little choked up. I'm like, all right, this is crazy. I'm like, there's a father of 4. There's a father of 1 that's, a year and a half old. There's a father of 3. There's a mom with a couple stepkids. And then there's these 2 other kids that are super young that haven't even really lived their whole life. I think one was like 22 and one was 19. So that really bothered me. So when we went back to our area where everyone was at, I think they had actually already started their convoy preparation, so they weren't even with us. But I started just addressing the rest of the guys that were there. I'm like, hey, you know what? Make sure you're keeping out. I know accountability is something we always talk about, and you guys probably haven't had it drilled into as much on the enlisted side as we do on the officer side, but it's really important. So you keep an eye out for the guy on your left and right. And as I'm saying this, I'm getting more and more choked up. So it's finally like, all right, you guys got this. Like, just get out of here.
Get out of here.
And one of my soldiers, female type, was just messing with him. She's like, what a pussy, you're getting all choked up. I'm like, thanks, real helpful. I'm like, This is legitimate concerns, though, because whether it's a rollover or something else, or if it was a combat situation, them getting overrun on a convoy, whatever, it is stuff that could really happen. Different set of circumstances, but regardless, the outcome could potentially be the same, which is just mind-blowing. And that was, like I said, at the very beginning of the mission. So all that safety was in the front of my mind, and I knew some of that stuff was going to be in the evening, or the dark hours, if you will.
Right.
So, and luckily, no injuries on our side. We didn't even have any key casualties, thank God. But it was still something that was very real, and not even in the back of my mind, kind of in the forefront of my mind the whole time. So,
I mean, it's like, you're the platoon leader / XO. You're the second one in command. There's one more guy above you. Like, these are your kids almost. Like, I would dare say that. I joke around. I use the kids all the time for anybody that's like 30 and younger, because I'm so dang old. But like, you end up caring about them. Maybe not to the extent that you would care for your son and daughter. I wouldn't know, not being a parent and all, but like, you do give a shit about these guys, and you want them to be safe.
No, absolutely. And I told him that's why I keep harping on you guys about, because I actually care about it. I joke around. I have a very sarcastic sense of humor.
I hope we've established that by now.
Yeah, right. But I'll joke around, and they'll be like, oh, hey, sir, blah, blah, whatever. I'm like, just remember, we're not friends. Like, just messing with them. And they know that's my sense of humor. I as of yet, haven't offended anyone. But I was giving one of our, she turned 19 while we were there, actually. I was giving her a hard time about something, just joking around. And I had gotten frustrated with someone because they were doing something dumb. And I didn't yell at them, but I made it known that I was unhappy with what they were doing.
No, so you're like, I'm the disappointed.
Yeah,
talk.
Pretty much. But it was a very stern conversation. And she's like, wow, you're really hard on them. I'm like, I don't act that way. I don't, discipline people because I don't like them. If I don't like you, I just wouldn't talk to you. So I obviously mess with you guys because I care about you, and I want to make sure you're being not only successful but safe, and getting home to your families and all that kind of stuff. And
right,
it's stuff that I'm sure they think about, but like you said, they're like kids. So some of them are close to my age, some of them are significantly younger. I was joking around with that particular private, saying you literally could be my accidental child, if because you're age wise, you would have been my high school kid had I made some poor decisions.
Some different choices back then.
Yeah. So but you definitely get close to these kids, and it's good and can be a hindrance sometimes. But I always joke around like, hey, remember, we're not friends or whatever, just messing with them. But they get it, and they saw me go to bat for them several times while we were there, like just putting, standing like, no, this is not happening. I don't care if you outrank me. I'm not letting them do this, period. End of story. And I like I said, I caught some flack for that, but at the end of the day, I don't regret it at all.
Right. I mean, it's in the your heart and brain are in the right place, I guess, for lack of better words. So earlier you talked about like, okay, you have people attacking you. You guys using Miles gear?
Yeah.
So add an additional like 8 pounds of crap onto you?
They're not that bad, but they're annoying because like when we got there, we zip tied everything to our body armor. We have to wear our ACHs, our combat helmets, all the time. And those weigh pretty much about as much as your head does anyway. So you're basically doubling the weight of your head. Plus you throw on night vision on top of that and whatever else, and plus the Miles gear. It's definitely annoying. And then we got to the point where we could get rid of our body armor. But like I didn't bring my flick with me. So I took the plates out of my carry.
How did that happen?
Oh, we didn't, like it wasn't on the packing list, and I hate my flick anyway.
Oh, okay. So it wasn't like a...
Yeah, and we were told we're going to wear body armor the whole time anyway. So that's all I brought. I didn't bring any extra crap because I knew I had to carry it all.
Right.
So some people downgraded to just their flicks, and at that moment in time, I was really regretting it because after wearing the plates for a few days, you know, again, I literally had broken blood vessels all on my shoulders, and they were... The new IBAs are really, like, they fit a lot better and everything, but the emergency release clips are right on top of your collarbones.
So I riding on your collarbone all day long.
Yeah, so I had big bruises on there, and it's the plates plus my night vision was on one side, my IFAX on another side, some other crap mag pouches and whatever hooked on there. Like it adds up to a decent amount of weight. Not saying it's gonna break your back or anything, but enough to get really uncomfortable after a while, especially wearing it pretty much all the time. Because anytime we were not inside of our tent, it was helmets, gloves, IBAs. We're wearing long sleeves. That was big takeaway. You can wear Army combat shirts to NTC. I would absolutely purchase them because they breathe so much better and are way more comfortable than just the regular uniforms.
Plus, they look really cool. So
yeah, they for signalators look pretty high speed.
Yeah, we got to get what we can, man.
But yeah, so that was one thing. As soon as I switched back to the normal uniform, I was like, oh my god, this is so hot, even though it was the same weather and less stuff on. So it was one of those things. But
God, so I remember Miles gear during basic training. It's just it's like laser tag, but like mid 90s, I think, late 90s era type stuff. I mean, it was real high speed back in the day. Now it's just kind of clunky and obnoxious because what happens? You have blanks that you're firing, so the explosion or the noise triggers that laser sight.
Correct. And
if you're in my line of sight, I'm aiming at you, then if I kill you, you're gonna just beep for forever, right? Until somebody with the key turns you off.
The God gun. The God gun. Blue electronic gun goes and turns you off. Yeah,
so that's supposed to help add some realism to it, right? And you're talking about how you told me the story about like how you were on the phone with your wife and were you like trying to amp yourself up, or were you just trying to get in the mindset of like this, let's treat this like this is real?
No, so we got our equipment up and running. So I will say that although NTC was one of the most miserable training experiences, in this way it was the most miserable training experience we had, like annual training wise, for most of my guys, myself included, just with the long hours and the simulated stress and just dumb stuff that added up, and real stress with people doing stuff wrong or not passing information, so you're doing the same job multiple times and whatnot. Our equipment got to 100% functionality, which has literally never happened for our company before. So that was huge. From a proficiency standpoint, it was ridiculously good for us.
So like you validated all your nodes, your systems, or you brought broken stuff up there with you and that got fixed? Like, what do you mean by
both? Yeah, so we had stuff that had partially worked before and people had gotten really close to making it work, or part of that system would work, because you have the secret side, the not secret side, and then another component that goes with it. And we provide voice and data for everyone, both secret and not. And we got every one of those systems running, which was awesome. We got to do retrans missions. They were actually functional, so we had comms during convoys, which otherwise we would have had like a decent area where we didn't have any comms. So that was huge for the command aspect of it. But we actually deployed one of our pieces of equipment out with a sister unit, which we've never done before. So we supplied communications for an aviation company, or I don't know what size element it was, but
so that's what I said earlier about like having customers. So like usually with AT and our Muta 8s, which are 4 days, like Thursday through Sunday, we go out to these training sites, we validate our nodes, we get our satellites talking to each other, take them down, and that's it, right? We never really get to understand or appreciate the I won't say like the joy, but like the satisfaction of knowing other people are using our stuff. So I didn't really mean to cut you off, but earlier I said customers, and I wanted people to know like what did I mean by that. So you were you said you got to set up retrans, and then you also got to watch people pull pages, right? Which is basically they have internet connection.
Yeah. So the immediate thing was we provided all the communications for a battalion. So that was cool. So the battalion could communicate down to the companies
Because of your guys' work.
because of our equipment and because of the hard work they
That's
put
cool.
in. So that was really, really cool. So they had phones, which everyone takes for granted, like, oh, I'm just going to pick up the phone and make a phone call. That takes work.
Like, I did that. You're welcome.
Yes, you're on a secret line now. You're welcome. And then they're able to use the internet and all the radio communications web, which sounds really simple, like radios. That's old. Like, how would you not? It's not super common for everyone to have fully functional radios and be able to communicate between multiple companies in a battalion. So we had that, and then the aviation unit. We sent out 2 guys and 2 big pieces of equipment, and they traveled. They actually ended up doing a 9-hour convoy, 6 of it with night vision, that's when stuff gets dangerous because vehicles roll over and hit stuff that they don't see because your depth perception is all jacked up. They damaged one of the pieces of equipment a little bit because of the terrain they were on, which I wasn't super excited about because it's like $1 million piece of equipment.
Is your JNN or
It was STT.
SCT, which is it's just a, I'm laughing. It's a satellite, it's like a vehicle with a little satellite dish. And the reason why I'm laughing is because there's so many whack jobs out there that accuse us of them being brain microwaves. Like, have you ever heard that?
Yep.
Yeah, it's, sorry, because we got accused of that a year ago. And then there's a YouTube clip of us refueling, and somebody's like, oh, this is the military Jade Helm. This is them with their mind control devices. Like, no, it's a freaking STT. It's a, what's it? Nick, can you pull it up?
Satellite terminal trailer. I could be wrong on that.
I should know
think
this.
that's what it is.
This is why I'm just so bad at this stuff. It is a satellite transportable
terminal. I was close.
Yeah. So anyway, it's a pretty expensive piece of equipment, but I guess if you really don't know what you're looking at, also it could look like I don't know, like a little alien communications device. But so you lent that out to a sister company.
That was actually one of our guys driving it, but the terrain was pretty crazy, and I guess it got caught on some rocks or something like that and damaged it. Luckily, not too bad. It's something that's fixable, and coincidentally, we're getting that equipment replaced anyway, just because it's time to get new equipment. So it worked out all right, but we have 3 of those. So 2 for the...
Oh my God, man. You guys are tiny.
We are tiny, yep. But we provide communications for a brigade typically.
Yeah, we got 12, just saying. Not trying to flex or anything, but...
how many of them work, though? That's the question.
As of AT 10. So.
Oh, nice. That's actually very impressive.
Yep.
But we actually got those, like I said, deployed and providing communications for an aviation unit. So that was really cool. SIPR, NIPR, voice and data, which is awesome. And we were able to call back and forth with them, and they were several miles away, which doesn't seem crazy because we can use that equipment way further than that. But within the box, it's, I forget how many acres it is, but it's pretty substantial size, but it's still within a training area.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, if it doesn't work, it's on you. So everybody's gonna be looking at you like, hey, why aren't my communications working? Like, you're gonna have colonels and people coming down on you pretty hard. Like, I need to talk to my guys, and try not to use the F word. But I imagine the good side is you get customers. The bad side is you have customers, so you gotta sustain that stuff.
Yeah, we were very, very fortunate to get everything up and running before we went into the box. So we had fully mission capable, or very close to it. We knew what we had to work through to finish it out, but within 24 to 40 hours of being in the box, we had everything completely capable, which is awesome. So you were talking about before the making a phone call to my wife. So that equipment, typically if we were overseas, it pings up to a satellite, shoots back down to a terminal and goes back and forth, whatever, but you're able to make phone calls. So we called Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, and then from there they patched me through to my wife. So we were using the equipment the way it should be because we're not allowed to have cell phones or anything. I got to talk to her. It actually took 3 phone calls to get through to her. So the first one, she ignored the call. She didn't know what it was.
She's like, what the hell is this?
The second one, the actual RJ-45 fell out of the back of the thing. I guess the little clip was busted on it, and I didn't know. So I moved just slightly, and it fell out of the back of the terminal. So
RJ-45 is that little Ethernet
yeah,
cable?
little plastic connector.
Yeah.
And the little snap was busted off, so it fell out. So that actually cut out right when when I was getting relayed through to her. And then the third time, she knew it was me, so she answered. But I talked to her for about 10 minutes. I kind of stretched my time limit a little bit because there wasn't many people around. Just talking about, how are the boys doing? How are you doing? All that kind of fun stuff. And then hang up with her. Hey, love you. I'll talk to you later. And not even probably 3 minutes later, we get a call over the radio, possible enemy attack, whatever. And then we hear fire and we hear shots fired. So I run out and I see one of my guys firing back towards our area. And I was like, ceasefire, ceasefire, ceasefire. Like,
you're gonna kill us all if you do that.
Yeah. And I turn the corner. He's kind of not hiding, but, taking cover behind a generator. And it's so loud. We have like 2 generators going in that same area. And so I round the corner where he's at, and he drops his rifle, not drops, but is not firing in that direction anymore. And as soon as I round that corner to see what he's firing at, they're like probably 15 yards away. And so I immediately come up for a shot. I'm like, okay, they're close enough. We're good. And come up, click, misfire. And I was like, no. And then
dead.
Yeah, all we hear from some guy in skinny jeans rolls up behind us, like, safety kill, because they don't want hearing damage, so they don't fire that close to you.
Right.
But as I'm laying, I laid there for probably 45 minutes or an hour as they're going through and doing. I was dead, so it didn't matter. And the kid that I told not to fire was dead also, which definitely struck a chord. I was like, I just got both of us killed. That's not ideal, but for doing the right thing, basically.
Yeah.
But as they're giving aid to the people that survived, one of my guys, a smart ass, of course, is like, Lieutenant Nelson, no. I'm like, just give him the finger. He's like, Lieutenant Nelson, yes. I'm like, whatever, dude. But as I'm laying there, I'm just thinking about it. I'm like, I literally just talked to my wife, just said, hey, how are the boys doing? Love you guys. Hope you're doing well. I'll see you soon. All that kind of stuff. And I'm sitting there like, if this was real life, I talked to my wife, 5 minutes ago. Now I'm dead. Nothing that I could control. Nothing I did wrong necessarily. Just something that happened. And then after that, I said I just basically lay there in the sun getting a nice little tan in the beautiful 100-degree weather in full kit. And they're, said rendering aid and whatever. And they finally say, okay, all the dead people get up, all the injured people, we're going to reset now. And I go in the tent and I was like, how'd everyone do? 23 out of 33 of us, 20 died and 3 got seriously injured. So 10 people survived that attack out of our 33 person company.
Maybe it's a good thing us signalers stay in the rear, because
in all fairness, we did have 8 kills before that. So as nerdy signalers, we killed 8 enemy combatants prior to that in a different attack. We just didn't make it back from that one.
Yeah, so it's all for naught. Yeah, I mean, it's so I would do that too, like in basic training and phase 3, when we'd have these like war games, for lack of better words, I just put myself in that mentality, like that mindset. Like, remember when we assaulted the city for phase 3?
That was awesome.
I was like, okay, so much fun. But I was like, okay, I'm going to treat this as if this was real life, and try to move as if I would in combat. And, because I know so much, with being a brand new, about to be a brand new LT, but just trying to understand, like, this isn't a video game. Like, it's fun, but at the same time, just understand, if you're ever in combat, you get one chance. That's it. Like, there's no reset button. There's no Call of Duty where if you get shot like 4 or 5 times, you can kind of just hide somewhere, breathe, and then you're good to go. So it's all about just the mentality of, okay, NTC, it's an opportunity to learn a bunch of stuff. It's an opportunity to suffer, but then also understand, like, this could be the last real chance I get before I'm actually deployed and put in a situation where, heaven forbid, we're overrun. And so in your case, you said you lost like 23 people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's what, 7 guys left of your entire platoon?
Just 10 total that were left.
So
and some of those guys died because they were sleeping and they didn't wake up fast enough, which was stupid on their part. Like, if there's an attack, regardless of if it's your time to sleep or not, get your ass up. And some of them were in our tent, like, waiting to, like, putting on their stuff. I just happened to get my stuff on quick and run out. So some of them were like, okay, I have my body armor, but I can't find my gloves or whatever. So they literally, I think 8 people died inside of our tent, because that's where the air conditioning is at, and that's where our computers are at, and that's where our radios are at. And so
that's
like,
where the bad guys want to target.
And so they just walked in, safety kill, safety kill, safety kill, safety kill. You're all dead. And they're like, oh, my one guy who's with Ranger Bat back in the day, he's like, that's BS. I had a shot on him right when he walked in the door, but he killed all of us anyway. I'm like, all right, have fun.
Of course he did. I have Ranger powers.
But the funny part is that truck that I went to fire at, it was no joke a ice cream truck with a 240 mounted on a pintle. And so after I died, like, I see this happening, all he says, and he goes through a full box of ammo, and it's just like smoking. There's so much ammo going off, whatever. And I'm like, that dude just rolled up through our barriers with a 240 mounted to an ice cream truck and killed a bunch of people. Like, that is awesome and terrible all at the same time. And then a beat up Ford pickup and a beat up Chevy truck came in. It barely ran, like exhaust is hanging off them. Guys hopped out of there and started shooting at us. So I don't remember how many people it was total, but it was obviously a lot less than we had there. But once they broke our perimeter, everyone, I think a lot of people had that same thing, like, I can't fire inward. That's something we keep getting told about. I can run out to our battle positions, but at that point I'm away from everything. So a lot of people didn't know what to do. And that's when we made it very clear, like, if you have a clean shot and you're not going to just be firing a machine gun into nowhere, then take it.
Right.
But at that time we hadn't come to that instance because everything else had been outside of our perimeter. So we would attack out, or, not attack, but return fire outside. So it was a learning experience for sure.
Did you guys have to, I'm assuming you had to pull your own security. Like, did you ever get a security detail, or were you guys just off to fend for yourselves the whole time?
We set up battle positions. So it was kind of a skeleton crew around our perimeter the entire time. And we, all the different companies there provided their guys. And then when we went into, ThreatCon Delta, everyone would be on the line. It was just literally all bodies except for anyone that was essential to, like, say, radio transmission operators. RTOs were sitting there on the radio communicating back and forth. And I did find out really quickly. So we had up armored Humvees, which we typically don't have in our company. I love them. They're awesome. One, because they have air conditioning, and two, they're up armored, and they're, they can...
Cool looking.
Yeah, they're cool. And if you get shot at with small arms, you're like, meh, no big deal, whatever, just keep driving through.
Yeah.
But I think 3 different times I was up in the turret with a weapon fire. I'm like, why is the lieutenant up here?
I was going to ask you, like, what were you doing up there?
Yeah, I loved it because I never get those opportunities since we don't normally do that. And I found out, like, we don't like being on the radio. We don't like relaying the information. I'm like, what the hell? Like, figure it out. Because I was sitting there and clipping on my vest and turn it up all the way and listen as stuff was going on. Let them know, hey, there's people coming from R6 and whatever, and but hold your positions and be ready. So when stuff came at us head on, we were like the primary force. It happened a couple times, which was really cool because we would be the guys initiating fire. But when it happened to our backs, like our areas were pretty big. When it happened behind us, we literally just had to sit there and wait. And, like, I really hope the guys behind us are doing their job because
that way I got
to hold my position. Yeah, because if it didn't and they, flanked the other direction, then that would be bare if we weren't in our position. So it's like, it sucks not being in the action, but, just got to wait for it and see what happens. Yeah.
There's I don't want to get too much into my 2 weeks of misery because it really wasn't that bad compared to what you went through. But we utilized some OPFOR, so some oppositional forces, and talking about, like, not being able to talk on the radio. So I guess we're getting attacked, and they're trying to enter our perimeter. And this corporal, she, like, comes on the radio, and she's like, I don't know how to use this thing, but people are dying everywhere. It's just like, God damn it. Like, at least try to, have some, I don't want to say radio etiquette, but just at least get into the game a little bit. And I don't know if she was just, like, freaked out or just didn't care or both. But it's just you don't get to replicate those opportunities too often. And so it's just kind of going back into I just talked to my wife, and here I am dead 10 minutes later just trying to get that mindset again, because when else will you get this chance? Like, you won't. Usually after NTC's deployment, right, that you guys are mobilized, and
we're not, but typically that's what it's for.
That's what the cycle or the progression looks like.
Yeah, we were a supporting unit this time around, but some of the people that were involved in that, I'm sure will be deploying. I don't know when or whatever, but that's typically what it's for, is you go there to prep for it. And ironically, right now, a lot of the people I know that are deployed have, like, a 24-hour Starbucks and a Baskin Robbins. They're not in the middle of the desert, in a fob that's, just got stood up, and which is what we tried to replicate. But that was kind of the joke. I had a couple people that are currently deployed, like, NTC is worse than this deployment for sure. I'm like, thanks, guys. Yeah. Really helpful.
Well, and that's the thing, is, like, it's NTC is supposed to test you and put all these really stressful conditions, supposed to see what it's like, show you what it's like to operate in 110-degree weather, because most likely that's where deployments are going to be. It's going to be somewhere out in the desert. So for me, and this is obviously me speaking without any experience of having done it, but like, you have to find out if you can handle it. If you can't handle 2 weeks out there, then what's a year going to be like? Assuming, what if we invade Iran, or what if we go into a country where we don't have bases already stood up, as you put it? I mean, I'll talk about my deployment in Bagram. It was cake, like sounding compared to like what you went to in NTC. It was easy. Like we did have the Starbucks. It was like green beans, I think. But like we've been there for a very long time. It's a very secure area. It's very safe. So the likelihood of that getting overrun was just very, 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 very minimal. In fact, if we had gotten overrun at Bagram, like something really bad, like World War III had just happened. Like it is like it would be a terrible scenario. So to be able to give your soldiers an opportunity to taste that that harshness, I guess, is probably one of the better things that NTC does provide soldiers.
Yeah, and that's the whole point of it, is to give you that kind of simulated real world. Like we're talking like early 2000s deployment, if anything, like the op tempo and just constantly moving. And they were running convoys throughout the day and night. And like I said, we're getting attacked frequently and constantly moving and setting up camp for a couple of days and then tearing it down and moving to another one, just doing that over and over. We did it a total of 4 times plus the jump back. So it definitely, one, you get really proficient. I was really, really proud of my guys, how fast they could tear it down and put it back up and have it fully functional, which is something we don't normally practice. And if they have to put up a tent twice in one drill, they're like, oh my God, what are we doing? This is so stupid. But doing it over a 2-week time period, like tear it down, put it back up. Let's put it back up better than we had it last time, and let's do it faster. And they did it, and they didn't complain about it. There were things that they complained about, just poor communication and stuff like that. But that was probably our just like in OCS, the biggest problems we had were more self-inflicted than anything else. So
right. So I actually want to ask you about like jump missions and op tempo and all other stuff. So kind of going back to the big picture. So you're admon, so you're there for about a week just to go through all the meetings, like understand, for lack of better words, like the rules, like what to expect, meet the other companies that you'd be working with, I imagine.
Right.
So you get out there, and then your whole company joins you, and then it's just preparation, right? It's just setting up. Did you ever validate your equipment?
Yeah, we did it before we went in the box.
Okay, but you did it at NTC or at the site?
Right.
Okay, so for those that may not be tracking that, so validating the equipment just means, does all my signal stuff work? Does all my computers and my modems and all this stuff work? So that way, when we actually take it out there, can we actually provide NIPR and SIPR communications, voice and data? So when you actually got out there to the box, like what was your typical day like?
Everyone was up at 04 because we had stand to at 04:30. So
what's stand to?
So it's kind of old school. Everyone's in their battle positions, and it's those twilight, those time of the sunrise. So you go out in night vision, and by the time you're done, you stay out there for an hour. By the time you're done, it's light out. So you're not using, because typically, historically,
that's when the enemy attacks.
When there's changes in light, so morning and evening, just because it's disorienting and it throws off your depth perception, all that kind of stuff. So it's if you're the one engaging it, it's definitely an advantage.
It's good for you.
Yeah, and it also is kind of a show of force as well, because if an enemy came and they're sending a patrol out to take a look at what's going on and they see that you're completely surrounded with everyone at their positions, they're not really going to want to mess at that point in time, because like, hey, they're ready for us, so let's not do it now. Let's wait till they're not paying attention.
Right.
So everyone had to be awake for that, and then we had day and night shift people because we were 24-hour ops, 24-hour operations. So during the day it was relatively busy. The good thing about Signal is once you have everything up and functional, at that point you're just maintaining things. So whereas like the transportation companies were running convoys all day long, we were making sure that stuff wasn't going down, and if it did go down, find out why and fix it as quickly as possible.
Right.
So they did do jamming a couple times, or I think I want to say during the AR it was like 11 times that they successfully jammed stuff. So we started pulling out like little hokey tricks to avoid it, like literally using coffee cans to shield our
that's resourceful
compasses on the STTs, because they just jam it they throw out a bunch of noise and whatever. But so we learned a couple tips and tricks before we went in from some of our sister units. Like, that's genius, we didn't know about that. Or just getting things configured correctly, because there's different meshes and whatnot. So if we're not part of that overall network, we're never going to talk to them. So even if all of our equipment is functioning properly, we're still never going to talk if we don't have all that stuff updated, and IP addresses and all that kind of stuff. So that's part of that preparation going in. But like I said, the night guys, they didn't do as much, and I'm not saying that disparagingly. They just
They just had to maintain.
They had to maintain, and a lot of them did sleep in shifts to get some sleep at night because, one, it was cool enough, and two, there wasn't that much going on. But they would make sure things are still up and running, because if something went down in the middle of the night, but they're still using it to track a convoy that got lost, which happened a couple times, they're still driving around in the middle of the night with NVGs on, trying to figure out what's going on. So them having comms was huge. But yeah, there was night flight operations and all kinds of movements going on at night. Like I said, we didn't see nearly as much of that because that's not part of our job. But then you just have your normal operations throughout the day. So the op tempo was more of like, okay, are we getting attacked? The intel would try to tell us, our S2 would try to tell us, hey, there's something coming, or we think there's something coming, or hey, we saw something.
Was this your own S2, or is this somebody that was
the battalion?
Okay.
Yeah, the battalion S2. So they'd pass information out over radio.
And S2 is your intelligence shop, or?
Yep. So there's a handful of guys, and once they'd never had the tools that we could provide services for. So they had known some of the stuff, and most of them were like, cool, we have internet, we have phones, we're good. But a couple of the guys were like, so I heard there's this really cool tool that we can use. How do we do it? And we're like, well, we provide up to the plug. You guys plug it into your stuff and use it from there, but none of them were trained on it. So we're like, all right, let's see what we can figure out. We're not experts in this, but we know computers, so let's play with it. I say we, I don't mean me by any stretch of the imagination, but my guys, we get there and play with stuff. So our guys that got attached to the aviation unit did a lot of that stuff for them, stuff that was way outside of the normal job scope, and they killed it. And by the time this is published, they will have received their awards for that already, so I can say it now.
Nice.
But they got awards from those from the aviation guys, even though they had a terrible experience with them. One guy had all his stuff soaked in diesel because off-road it tipped over and soaked all of his equipment in it. Like I said, they damaged our equipment, and they had like a couple 24-hour straight shifts, which they promised them ahead of time that they wouldn't do. And like sleeping out in the middle of the sun with no shade. So
24 hours, there you go.
They had some not so great experiences with them, and they weren't mad at me, but they were mad in general and vented to me quite a bit about it. And they're two really positive guys, so I was very surprised, like, this effing bullshit and blah, blah, whatever. And I was like, I'm really sorry that it got there, but every time we would call to check in on them, oh yeah, they're busy right now, we'll let them know you called. And we literally called between myself, my commander, and another one of their co-workers, called, no exaggeration, probably 20 times at least. And apparently they never relayed those messages to him. So they had no idea we were calling to check on them. And they had
just felt they were like cut off the whole time.
Yeah, and they had issued all their phones out because the people they were providing communications for wanted like all the phones. So they didn't have any, like, you guys really went through 16 phones? Like, yeah, we would borrow this one sometimes, but they didn't like when we took it out of that area. I was like, what the fuck? Like, what is going on right now? And I was really mad. There was a lieutenant that I had worked with before they went out, and I had a chance to talk to him after and voice how unsatisfied I was with it. I didn't yell at him, but I made it very, very clear that I was very unhappy about how it went down and how they did not hold up their end of the deal. And we got interrupted before that conversation was over, which was the only thing that actually kept me from actually yelling at him. And normally I'm not a yeller by any stretch of the imagination, but it did happen a couple times where I just lost my cool and just screamed at people. They deserved it, but like I said, normally that's not my personality, but like I said, it brings stuff out in you that good, bad, and otherwise.
Yeah, I just feel, again, just going to the whole, it's a testing ground for company, soldiers, yourself. Just, I mean, the awesomeness and both the ugliness both surface, I'm sure. You have to figure out what you're going to feed. So your typical day is basically just making sure that the equipment's set up. Jump missions, that's been said a few times. So were you attached to another company, or like where were you specifically? We
were attached to the battalion, so we're within walking distance, typically 100, 200 meters of 100 to 300 meters of our battalion that we were supporting. And that's where our equipment was. Some of our equipment was set up there, and some of it was in our area. And then, like I said, some of it was a couple miles away. But so we had to go to meetings back and forth throughout the day, a couple different things. So I went to some of them, my commander went to some of them, just to kind of spread the load a little bit. But they were always close by. And then the other companies that were with us, we were all within, I forget how, but I think the biggest location we were in was like, it was a triangle that each side of that triangle was like, I want to say 700 meters. So it wasn't a giant area, but big enough to where if you had to go from one end to the other, you'd be like, oh my God, I just walked 7 football fields to get here.
Like, walk all over there.
Yeah, actually, no, I take it back. One was, it was a lopsided triangle. So the longest side was 1 kilometer, and then the shortest side was 7, and the other side was 8. So it was a good area to walk if you had to go from one side to the other.
So a lot of the maintenance was basically, were you in place most of the time, or did you guys move at all? Like, did the battalion move with you, or did they move and did you move with them?
Yeah, so when we did the jumps, everyone moved. So battalions and all the companies attached to them, everyone moved at one time.
What's the scenario? But like, our place is compromised, we got to pack up all our crap and move, or was there like a story behind that? Or
they didn't actually give us a reason. Well, actually, I take it back. It was explained to us ahead of time, which the communication was the hardest part for me, because I'm like, we need an intent to be able to move forward. And some of that was lost going from the battalions down to the company. Some of that was lost going from company command down to the platoon leaders and the rest of the company, which was extremely frustrating. That's something we, I don't want to say argued about, but something that we talked about sternly a few times between my commander and I. Just not having that flow of information. But they would say, hey, in 24 hours we're going to move to this next location, because we were basically, I don't want to say chasing behind, but we were trailing behind the people we were supporting as a battalion.
Right.
So every time they move, we'd move as well, just to kind of keep some distance. In the actual training environment, we only moved within a couple mile, I want to say within a 13-mile area, just because it wasn't necessary. We could provide everything we needed to from within that little tiny box, and it helped reduce the risk of accidents and stuff like that. So while some people moved across the whole map, because we had 2 maps that we taped together, and you would operate within that entire map, but our little section was pretty small, again, just to, I think, mitigate some of that risk. But it accomplished the same thing, because the first location we went to, we set everything up, and then we convoyed out in a few different chalks or a few different groups, and you could literally see them up until the point where they set up the next camp, and they disappear over a hill. But it was right on the other side of that hill is where we're setting up, so it's literally like 2 miles away, and you could see the entire thing. We're like,
it's like we could have just walked over there.
Right. We watched them with binoculars. They just like boop disappear behind this hill, and that's where they stopped. So it's kind of funny. But
so I mean, it's not, you're just not there chilling for 2 weeks. Like, you're maintaining your equipment, you're getting attacked, you're getting hit with gas, you're getting hit with drones, you're getting hit with all these various challenges. So it's enough to keep you busy for 14 days. It's not just, hey, our equipment's up and we're just going to kick back.
No, not at all. Actually, one of the funny things that happened, or crazy things that happened, was we got to our first location, and they said, the Advon guys that I sent out ahead of time, they're like, don't go in that area. There's engineer tape. There's a white tape around there. I'm like, okay, what's going on? Like, there's unexploded ordnance over there. I'm like, oh, okay, like, it's notional. We're like, no, actual unexploded ordnance that they're supposed to come out and take care of. And I'm like, for real? Because that sounds terrible. That sounds really dangerous.
By the time out, are you guys for real right now?
Yeah, and they were dead serious. So they taped off an area and set 3 of our Humvees around it just to keep a little perimeter around it. And keep in mind that some of our senior leadership are EOD guys, explosive ordnance disposal guys. So they know the risk and whatnot. So yeah, we can still set up around. It's not anywhere near ideal, but we're outside of that blast area, whatever, in theory. So by the time, and none of our guys could touch it, even though we had EOD guys out there, which was frustrating. So we had to wait for the Fort Irwin people to come out and take a look at it. And by the time they got out there, which was 5 days after we got there, so it's the day before we were supposed to make our first jump, they're like, hey, how long have you guys been out here? We're like, 5 days. And this has been here the whole time? Yep. Seriously? And you guys still set up around it? Like, yep. Seriously? Like, and did you guys call anyone? Like, yeah, we called it, right when we got here. So one of our guys actually almost drove over it within like a 2-foot swath where they drove over. He got out and luckily did his sweeps, even though it was, it's a notional environment. In that case, it actually was a real thing. Like, hey, we just drove past this, and it's, 15 meters from where we stopped our vehicle with equipment on it, heavy enough to, if it was an IED or whatever, set it off. In that case, it was a piece of artillery that just didn't explode. But they're like, really? They were not happy to know that we had EOD, that we'd been there for a while. And
you're just chilling next to it, setting up shop.
And we're like, dude, this isn't my choice. I wouldn't have set up here, but this is what we have to work with. So I did. I'm like, all right. So they had it taken care of really quickly. But it's still one of the things like, okay, people actually die here. One of my guys almost ran over, unexploded ordnance, and we're still driving on from there. So, and this at this point, it's relatively early on. So I'm like, okay, still worried about my guys, worried about driving tonight and all that kind of stuff. But like I said, it really kind of shows everyone's true colors, because there was stuff that leadership wanted to do that I was like, that's a hard no. It's not going to happen. Like, we're not doing that. I don't care if you yell at me or whatever. It's not happening. So luckily I stood my ground, and it didn't become an issue. But stuff like that was just that much more enlightening. Like, hey, this is stuff that's actually out here. We do live fire exercises. Yeah, it gets swept after the fact, but obviously that got missed. So, there's chances of stuff like that.
So that was actually one of the things I wanted to ask. And that was, you told me earlier about this gun truck story and fighting the worthy battles, because there's obviously, as a lowly O2, you only have so much pull and so much sway over all the officers above you that are making these calls. And I imagine there's times where you had to contest a lot of things. So like the gun truck, like what happened there, and how was that a good example of a battle you wanted to fight and win? Yeah,
so we fought really hard to get some retransmission opportunities, and the one that we finally got, and I say we, it was mainly my commander. I'll give him credit for that. He was like, hey, we want to do this, hey, we want to do this, hey, we want to, and they warned them for like 10 days out of the 14 days they were there. So they finally, for our last jump, said, okay, fine, you can have it. And they gave us one that they didn't, I think at least, one they didn't think we could accomplish with the resources that we had, and we did. So nice. There's middle finger to you. Thanks, we got you covered. But he was so excited to finally get it that he was willing to send him out without security. So like, okay, and this is something I promised them before. It's something I use as an actual example before we ever left Arizona. I'm saying I will not let you guys go out without security. That's something a retrans team needs to have, because you're setting up equipment. At least for a portion of time, you're not going to have any coverage, and you're an easy target, because you go out there with a certain amount of food and water and your equipment, and you're alone. You're left out.
But you have an OE-254 too, so you have this big antenna saying, hey, come attack us.
Exactly. It's a big lollipop sticking up. They're like, this is where I'm at. It's like a Google pin drop.
Like, there you go. I'm right here. Please attack me.
Yeah. So I had promised them already. I'm like, I won't let this happen. And I had told the colonel in charge, like specifically that example, like I will not let that happen. And I know that you would respect if I pushed back and said no. And he's like, you're absolutely right. That was just like a sidebar conversation we had. So we finally got to it, and doctrinally you're supposed to have 3 people set up an OE-254 for safety purposes. You can do it with 2 people. But they sent out my superior wanted to send out 4 people total. So okay, 1 person can pull security, which anyone knows that anytime you pull security, it's supposed to be 360. So 360 degrees of coverage.
Cover like the whole area.
Yeah. It's going to sit on top of the OE-254 and spin around. But so we want to send them out there. Oh, well, it really only takes 2 people, Mike. So again, you're going to have 2 people out there protecting, the other 2 people essentially. So they're still very exposed, and like, oh, they'll be fine. And I'm like, we're losing sight of what we're trying to do just because we find the opportunity to. I'm not going to let it happen that way. And I got a ton of super shitty attitude and a ton of pushback. Like, don't worry about it. I got this under control. I know what the risks are, blah, blah, whatever. I'm like, I want to make it very known that I disagree with this, and I will 100% stand behind that if anything happens, like real world or otherwise, that I was not on board with this. That's fine. Do whatever you want to do, blah, blah, whatever. So I'm like, okay. So I vented to a couple of senior enlisted folks about it, just because they happen to be at the same meeting I was at, and told them like, this is BS. I don't agree, whatever. And they flat out said like, well, luckily for you, the OCTs will not let them do that. They'll kill that mission before it ever starts if he sees them going out. And another guy was like, well, we actually have guys that can jump on your gun trucks and go out with them. So it's still only a 2 vehicle operation, but you'll have 6 people instead of 4. And then that way, at least 3 of your people can pull security, or 3 people can pull security, which it's a triangle. It happens. So you can still pull 360 coverage, right?
It's better than one dude by himself.
Yeah. So that ended up going off that way. And when that conversation came up later on, it was like, oh, that was my plan the whole time. I was like, really? Because I set it up, and we argued about it, and we both got a little bit loud with each other about it, but it was your plan the whole time? Like, okay, sounds good. And one of my junior NCOs saw that interaction and how passionate I was about it, and she was one of the people that went out on that mission. So later on in the day, when I was in a meeting, she was pressured in to do something that wasn't safe. She was saying, hey, one of those guys you're sending out on the security team is going to be up in the turret when you guys are traveling with your 50 cal. And which is the wrong answer, because he wasn't trained for it. He wasn't trained on that weapon except for some impromptu training he got ahead of time, like that day. And he wasn't trained to be in the turret while traveling. So it's a couple different things. Army is surprisingly safety conscious, so there's certain hard no's that they won't allow.
Right.
So she fought back on that one. She's like, I will not allow him to be in the turret while we're traveling. End of story. He doesn't have the training, we're not doing it. And I come back from the meeting, and her and her counterpart are kind of arguing about this after the fact. Like, oh, you didn't stand up, you didn't stand behind me, whatever. And I'm like, what's going on? Like, what's the situation? They weren't fighting, but they were just ribbing each other about it pretty hard. And she's like, this is what happened. I'm like, you're 100% right. I would have said the same thing. And so I went and approached him after, kind of like nonchalant, like, hey, so I heard you want to stick someone in the trailer. Oh yeah, I know, we decided against that, whatever. I'm like, good, because that would have been a whole different conversation right now, rehashed again.
No, good.
So just, again, people finally getting the opportunity to do stuff and willing to put stuff aside that shouldn't be put to the side.
Right.
So and that
cut corners or bend the rules a little bit.
Yeah, and that kind of got me some street cred, if you will, with my guys showing, and it was multiple things like that, but usually safety related that I pushed back or stuff that just didn't make sense. Like, why are we doing this twice, or why are we doing it this way? It doesn't make any sense. And depending on the situation, I'd push back and be like, hey, sir, this doesn't make any sense. Like, this is dumb. Like, we need to do it a different way, and point out a couple things. And if it was something that he wasn't super passionate about, he's like, hey, fine, go ahead and do it. But some of us are like, no, it needs to be done this way. I'd be like, I disagree. I'll execute because that's my job. Whatever.
But this is dumb. It's not the best idea.
Yeah, and I'd put out the better idea. Like, no, do it this way. Like, okay, whatever. And it wasn't safety related, so I didn't care that much either. I cared, but I wasn't willing to get in trouble over it. So at a certain point, some of my NCOs were like, sir, this is stupid, we shouldn't do it. I'm like, I've already fought this battle. Just execute now. They're like, all right, fine. So they knew when, same thing. They knew when to push back and when to just be like, okay, fine.
Like he at least tried. We trust our LT to try to do right by us, and you can't protect them from all the shit sandwiches. Sometimes you just got to eat it regardless.
Yep, exactly.
Trying to wrap up, but because the thing with NTC and like it's hard to stay in a general scope. It's really easy to dive in on the signal aspect because I'm kind of asking just for my own knowledge and the event that I'm actually going to be with them next year. But also, hopefully, we can use these nuggets to give to my company so they'll be better prepared. But when all was said and done, what would you say your biggest takeaway was? Like,
no pun intended, but communication. And I don't mean with equipment. I mean communication between individuals from the top all the way down. Because having to do something a second or a third time in 100+ degree weather pisses people off. And even your most reliable guys and your guys with the best attitude, they eventually get run down. And that's exactly what happened with us. Is I fought a lot for them to avoid doing dumb stuff, and it finally got to the point where I would tell my superiors, like, hey, walk me through exactly what you want, because you keep telling me you don't care how I do it, and then when I do it, you have us redo it.
That's what you said about you wanted intent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and vague intent is fine if you are fine with me executing how I want to. But if it's vague intent and then you're like, no, that's not exactly what I wanted. One of my guys actually had a pretty good analogy. I said, I keep getting skin that cat however you want to. And it's like saying, hey, make me dinner. I don't care what you make. You're good. And then I make dinner like, well, this isn't what I wanted. I wanted mashed potatoes, steak, and green beans.
It's like, why didn't you say that?
Firm, not soggy. And one of my NCOs was like, and why'd you use the red plate? I like the blue plates. So it's just like, don't tell me you don't care how I do it if you have specific details you want done with it. So that communication, some of those details were dictated by my commander. Some of those were dictated higher up and just never made their way down to us. So like, oh yeah, I was done that way. That's my bad. I didn't tell you how to do it. Or, hey, we have this coming up. And this is what we ran into early on before we actually went into the box, was a lot of those late nights, those 20-hour days, 18, 20-hour days, could have been avoided had we had information earlier. We could have executed earlier and actually gotten 6 hours sleep instead of 4.
So how would you not get the information?
They have the commanders update briefs, the Cubs, every night at a certain time, and they go over things for the next day, which is stuff that should get passed down to us that night so we can know to prepare for it. But they also have published orders that I didn't know about until we were a few days in. So I was able to...
Like an op board or...
They were fragos, but they were mini fragos basically.
So real quick, op boards and operations order, it's what we pretty much live and die by. It basically just outlines the mission, and without getting super technical or granular, it just basically it's like the guidelines of how things are going to get carried out. And a frago is a fragmentary order, which means here's the original op board. Frago is like, hey, something changed. There's actually more bad guys than we thought, so this is how you're going to adjust. Or, hey, we need to change our location, so you're going to jump to this site. So just because I remember I said frago earlier, and I didn't really preface it with what that meant. But so you're saying there was published orders that you could have like read or had?
Yeah, with some of the details on it that would have been really helpful, that we could have, hey, we need 3 guys for this later on. We're going to detail for this, that, or the other. Or, hey, there was we got put on KP duty, which is, you go and help the cooks, basically serve food, whatever. And they'd cycle through people with that. Well, we were supposed to have 2 people in the morning and 2 people in the afternoon when we were getting hot meals, if you can call them that, fake eggs and whatnot.
Powdered eggs.
And powdered eggs. And
so good.
Yeah, it's delicious stuff. And then the, what are they? I'm blanking on the name of them right now. They're basically giant MREs.
Oh man, I know what you're talking about.
I'm completely blanking on the term, but
Nick, just see if you can Google giant MRE. See if it, because it's like what? It's like a gigantic. It's supposed to feed like a platoon, right? Or it's supposed to be like this gigantic.
It's the same quality as an MRE, it's just in bigger batches.
So think of lasagna, pretty much like a frozen.
Yeah. Think
heat
of
this
your
up and
Marie calendars or whatever, lasagna but terrible. That's what it is.
Yeah.
UDOs? That's not a UDO. It's
gonna come to us later.
Yeah, later once this is done, I'll think of it. But so basically they boil water, heat this stuff up, and then serve it, and it's delicious. But
I'm sure it is compared to like a regular MRE. It can't be that much.
It
worse.
seemed better. Quality wise, it wasn't better, but it seemed better because it was being served to you versus you're opening up a bag and heating it up with a heater or leaving it in the sun until it's hot enough to eat, which actually does work, sadly enough. But we missed our 2 guys that had duty because we didn't know about it. Like, oh yeah, I could have sworn I told you guys about that. I'm like, no, you didn't, and then we got yelled at for it. So thanks for that. So just stuff like that. I found some workarounds. I was getting those orders from someone else even after I brought it up to my commander. Hey, I need these. Oh yeah, I'll get them to you, and then I'd have to go to someone else to get them every morning. So working well with others, playing well with others really works. Our current commander did not play well with others, so it was very hard. I had to kind of be the intermediary there to be like, hey, can you help us out, even though we're not giving you, working as easily as we could with you. By we, I mean he. But luckily I had worked with some of those other people, even though they weren't our normal parent unit. Worked it well enough with other people in that unit to be able to get stuff done. But getting your stuff updated or getting your equipment fixed ahead of time if possible. And then just the hardest part, especially at the end, the last week, was keeping people motivated, because we had a bunch of people that were super highly motivated that never complained about anything. And by the time we were done, we had higher ups asking us for more every time. Like, hey, we're done fixing all our equipment. We just need you guys' help for 48 more hours. And our guys are exhausted and they're pissed off because they're doing other people's work at this point. Okay, we just need 48 more hours out of you. And so I got to the point where at the end, I was walking around we were all spread out all over the place. And I was walking up to 2 to 4 people at a time, like, hey, I really just want to punch myself in the face before even telling you this for the 5th time, but we're this close away from being done. Just push a little bit more. And I promise, I know this is the most miserable experience you guys have had, but we are accomplishing amazing things. And even though we're not doing our work anymore, we're doing other people's work, we're still getting the mission done. And like I said, towards the end, it was very hard. Like once they said, hey, you know what, you work 48 more hours and you guys are going to get a break. Well-deserved break. You guys have been doing an awesome job. Excellent. And then in that next meeting being like, hey, we need a little bit more out of you. Just seeing,
oh, come on, you're killing me.
Every platoon leader, commander, first sergeant just kind of shrink in their seat a little bit, like, oh, you just backed out of a promise you made to us that we made to our guys. So now, yeah, it's still you pulling that string and they know it, but they're still like, really?
Doesn't change the outcome.
It doesn't change the fact that they're still getting run into the ground. They still hate their lives. But now we get to let them down one more time because we are the person telling them, hey, this is what's up this time. So yeah, just communication, keeping people as high-spirited as possible. We managed to sneak in some pizza from an outside source. One of my soldiers had...
I'm going to need the number to the source.
Yeah, one of my soldiers had a sibling that is stationed there, which I feel very bad for him because Fort Irwin is not the most beautiful place to live in. But she, as soon as we got our phones back, she put an order in with him and he brought like a dozen pizzas out because that day we were provided no hot meals. It was MREs all day long. And so brought in a cooler full of Monsters and sodas and whatever, and a dozen pizzas for all of our guys to eat. And they burned through that stuff like crazy. Actually, I think they got like 5 pizzas originally and just like went and made another order, and nice. he brought them all into us. So that was pretty cool. But that kind of stuff still runs out at some point. The morale still gets pretty low. So luckily I made sure to know that I was super proud of them. We accomplished a ton. like this will be over soon, but even eventually having it come from someone they know cares about them still only lasts for so long before they're just like, I'm done. We had one of our soldiers, Japanese, speaks pretty broken English. What he told me, he told me, morale is very low. And I was like, yes, you're absolutely correct.
If I didn't meet this individual last week, I'd be like, you sound terrible making fun of him like that, but he really does talk like that.
Yeah, he's very, very first generation Japanese. So, but he told me, he's like, I know you stick up for us. I appreciate that. You try to solve problems, not make more problems. I was like, thank you. That is a compliment at this point. I appreciate it because it doesn't seem like that's what's coming across the table a lot of times.
They're not seeing you as the bad guy. They understand that you're not dictating these extra long days. They've given you everything you've ever asked of them and more, and now you're asking more, and they realize it's not coming from you.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had two guys that I think they drilled with us once before going to NTC, so they're brand new to the unit essentially. One of them was like, what the hell? He actually came from your company.
I was just gonna, without name, I was like, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, and
poor kid.
He's like, what the hell? He goes, I'm about to be a sergeant and I feel like I've been a bitch the entire time. I'm like, dude, we're a small company. Like everyone is, I was loading Connexes to get us out of there quicker and try to get them efficiently loaded, so we only had to do it one time versus reloading a couple times like they wanted us to.
Right.
I'm like, I totally get where you're coming from. I know you see the officer side of the house not physically doing as much, but I promise you we are pushing, trying to make things as best as possible. And I don't think he really believed that part way through, but I think at the end he realized like, okay, you guys do care. You're trying to get stuff done. And the other kid kept good spirits. He actually ended up being way more inappropriate than I thought. I was so proud of him. I was like, yes, you're one of my people. From going from this really quiet kid, we called him Baby Franco because he kind of looks like the younger Franco brother, and which he thought was cool. I had actually a couple nicknames that stuck, which I thought was pretty. You know, one of my kids is Noodles, and he actually wrote Noodles on the side of his ACH, his band. I was like, I didn't think any of these nicknames stuck, but cool. So
it's funny how like small things like that will help keep morale up, and just having those like I guess like just the jokes, like whatever little thing you can to just carry them through the dumbest stuff is probably super valuable. And like when you see somebody own something that you've bestowed upon them, like Noodles, that's kind of cool. So and this kind of ties into I guess like not the point of this episode, but like what would you like real quick, what would you have done differently now that it's all over and done with? You knew about this in advance. I mean, it's on the M-Day side, meaning you're a traditional National Guardsman. You do 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year. A lot of this probably falls on the full-timers to do a lot of the planning and the preparations, but like just from your perspective now, is there anything you would have done differently? Would you have been more involved in the planning? Would you have been less involved? Like, is there anything that you would have done to make your experience a little bit less, I don't want to say shitty, but what could you have done to have a better outcome? Yeah,
a majority of it did fall into the full-time staff, which is what it is. But I stayed pretty involved only because I'm on orders, so I could be there. And I tend, even when I was just typical M-Day status, I still try to stay really involved. But not taking as many people for their word. Like, oh yeah, it's getting taken care of. Doing more follow-up, more like granular.
Trust but verify.
Follow. Yeah, exactly. Being like, hey, you say this is getting done, but I need to see the outcome. I need to see the proof. Because there was some stuff like from the supply side of the house that just didn't get done. Like, oh yeah, it's going to be on the next order. Like, cool. Where's that order at? When is it coming through? Give me specifics. And that's one thing that I used to think one of the commanders I had a couple levels up was kind of a jerk, because he'd do that a lot. He'd be like, give me specifics, or like, who is they, or whatever. I'm like, man, this guy's a ball buster. And I totally understand why he does that.
You're talking about the guy I think you're talking
about? Probably. But it was one of those things like, man, this guy is so like up everyone's butt all the time. And now I totally get why, because yeah, it's annoying, but it made people provide proof of what's going on.
Yeah.
So not being a jerk about it, but the follow-up more than anything else.
This guy?
No, a different person. Yeah.
Because that guy, he taught me that. Like, I had to learn the hard way. It's like, why is this guy always up our ass? Like, he's just everywhere. And it just taught me how to, and I'm still learning this lesson, unfortunately, but just trust but verify. Like, you can trust people to do what they say they're going to do, but if you don't follow up and make sure it's getting done, then stuff can, like, the ball can be dropped. And I just think, like, I don't know, people like him, they really pushed me in like the better sense, I think, for lack of better words. But yeah, I'd probably have to talk about him another day. But
for sure, the guy you're referencing, I didn't care for him before we went. I know he was kind of a mentor to you. I never really cared for his personality and the limited interactions I had with him. But after working with him, I'm like, oh, you're one of the good dudes. I was completely wrong. I apologize. He actually helped me prep for my interview before I did it, like the day of, like, hey, you know, is there anything? I said, I have some topics I think they're going to hit on. He's like, yeah, hit on this, hit on that, hit on the other. And I went into that interview after I had a couple people that helped me. I had a female captain help me who had been in command recently. I had him who had just come out of command as well, and another senior NCO that I kind of went through and like, hey, can you give me more information about these topics and like what do you think I should take a look at and whatever. And they were all very helpful. And like I said, that particular person, I was like, oh, this guy's kind of a jerk ahead of time, like just from the limited interactions that I had. And once he was explaining some things to me and said, hey, look out for this as a commander, you're going to want to do this. I was like, oh, he actually does care. He just likes to mess with people. Like, that's cool.
Oh,
I can completely I can completely relate to that because I like to mess with people too, so it makes sense. But so completely changed my image.
So pretty much trusting and verifying, again, that's like, if I had a motto, I need to adopt that just for my own well-being, sanity down the road. Also, just being more involved in helping your full-time staff, just being more integrated with them. Is there any other points that you would say that you would have done differently this time?
Exactly what you're doing. Ask questions of people who've been there before. The only people I had to reference who had been there before were my commander, and he was kind of vague in what happened. And the battalion commander that we went under, he had been like, I think it was like his 9th time or something like that. But he wasn't necessarily super accessible, so I didn't get to talk to him too much. But yeah, tap into whoever you know to kind of point out, because some of those landmines might not seem huge, but just the little stuff I said, following up on stuff, being involved in those meetings, even if that means taking time out of your personal time,
right, or
your civilian work day, 100% worth it. Some of those meetings are going to be a complete waste of time. Like, man, why did I just sit here for an hour and listen to people that have, you know, don't directly work with whatever. But some of them, those little nuggets you're going to pull out, like, that sounds important, I should hold on to that, or that sounds like it's going to become important, or that doesn't sound right and that's going to affect me. I need to talk about that. Some of that stuff we were able to identify early on, and some of it was after the fact, like, that just clicked. I knew that didn't sound right and it just totally screwed me. So
right. Well, it's like you said, you the little landmines here and there, I mean, they may not be huge, but you're out there for 14 days during this blistering heat, everyone's fatigued, that shit can add up. So like, whatever you can take away and spare, you know, future pain, I mean, it's probably, I wouldn't say like, no, how can I put this without sounding retarded, ridiculous? If you can avoid it, like, why not? Why not put the time in now and do your best to avoid what you can, because you're going to have plenty to deal with when you're out there. Because that's the thing, I think you mentioned it earlier, just you going in this with this mentality of it's a big war game, everyone's being evaluated on certain levels, it's not going to be perfect, so you just have to be flexible and think on your feet, but just do your best to prevent what you can, and I guess see if time passes, or let come what may.
And one thing that gets harped on a lot is SOPs. Get your SOPs down on paper in case someone...
Actually, that's a big one.
Yeah, and it's funny, like, yeah, SOPs are important, but I told my guys, like, I know we harp on SOPs, it sounds super generic, but some of this stuff, you're not going to be here next time we deploy this. So you're going to get promoted out of that position, or you're going to be training someone brand new, and you're going to be... The perfect illustration was those guys that got attached to aviation. 2 of those guys were our most experienced people in that equipment, or those 2 people were our most experienced in that equipment. So the people that stayed behind, a couple of them had a lot of experience doing it and they were able to help out. But the majority of them, I think we had 5 people, something like that were the ones that always get pushed to the back because the other guys are really good at it.
Right.
So they got a lot of valuable training experience out of it. But if that was our only option and they didn't have some of those notes and didn't have anyone to coach them, we quite possibly would have been screwed. Like, they could have maybe fumbled through it, but it wouldn't have been super likely. So having some of those notes written down and some of the, you know, vital pieces of information actually on paper, or someone there to be like, oh, hey, you need to look at this, we would have been probably not mission capable at that point. So having that stuff written down, and hey, if this happens, take a look at this and this first, or if this happens, you know, roll back to this version that's saved, or whatever the case might be. So
yeah, especially when you're stressed out, getting attacked, you might not have the chance to think creatively and just figure out what to do in those situations. So speaking of asking questions, I mean, depending on how this is received, I imagine if people have questions for you, I'm going to just whore out your information.
Yeah, absolutely.
So comments, messages, emails, however we start.
Mail, whatever, I don't care.
Yeah, hate mail. But that's the thing is like I think you learned the best from those that have been there before you, and I think I've got a lot of takeaways already for my signal company, whether I'm there with them or not. And I keep saying that, but it's definitely something I want to pass on. But I'm sure we could talk about NTC for another 2-3 hours if the masses want that. I'd be more than happy to have you back on. But maybe next time we can focus a little bit more back on just the leadership aspect and OCS and kind of dig more into those. But I think we'll wrap it up there, man. So thanks.
Yeah, and if anyone has any better ideas for stuff for us to talk about, by all means, throw them at.
Yeah, for sure. Throw them at me. Sorry. So as I was explaining earlier in this episode, with this one, I felt like we can get a little more technical or granular, for lack of better words, since we kind of already established Lieutenant Nelson's background. If you're new to this and this is the first time you've seen him, I very strongly encourage you to go check out our first episode. But that's kind of the tone that I want to have with this. Is basically we set up the individual, we kind of learn more about their backstory, and then we actually dive into something very specific. So. And we try to do this with as much of a high-level general perspective as possible, because we want people that are tuned in to get the most out of it and get what they can. So as we said, if you enjoy listening to this, please send your feedback, your comments, all that good stuff on our YouTube channel, instant messages or whatever. Figure out how that works out too. But in the meantime, just thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next episode.